Constantly shifting through the time-space continuum, Metron's three disciples observe the universe from the Mobius Couch.
All right, hey everybody, and welcome to the second episode of the Mobius Couch. My name is Patrick. I also go by Patty. Joining me today is Alessandro, who also goes by Ollie.
Hey, that's me. Hey, everybody.
Also joined by Joe.
Oh, hey guys. Hey, Al. Hey, Patty.
It's good to see you guys.
Yeah, it's good to see everybody.
Also, I call Alessandro Al, not just Ollie. So, I feel like everyone will figure that out, but, it's just going to happen.
Yeah. I was going with not alliteration, because I don't know what the word is when it's the ending syllable sounds the same, but like Patty, Ollie, that is what I was going for.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a word
is
for
that?
that?
A thing?
I don't think there is.
A rhyme when the end is the same?
What?
A rhyme is when the end is the same.
Is that what a rhyme is?
I think that's a rhyme, Pat.
Ollie, Patty, that's a rhyme? I don't know.
I don't know if that's a rhyme, but I think what he's trying to describe is a rhyme.
So yeah, first episode of the Mobius Couch, we talked about King and Mitch Gerads' Mr. Miracle, and we were texting after that, and we said we left a lot on the table that we didn't talk about. So we're going to talk about all the stuff we didn't talk about last time.
A huge part of this is kind of playing with the anti-life equation, which originally, I'm assuming it was in the Jack Kirby 70s New Gods, but it's like Darkseid's master plan in the DC universe is to find the anti-life equation, which is an equation that proves that like life isn't worth living and people lose free will and become slaves to Darkseid, is I think how it's supposed to work comic-wise.
That's my understanding as well.
Yeah, I mean, what the comic does really well is it kind of plays with this like pervasive DC concept, and it basically plays with it and says like, well, it's depression.
Yeah.
Like the anti-life, like depression is the anti-life equation. It is like the loss of will to live. And the comic basically, it just does it really well. But it like, instead of having the anti-life equation, for example, like how Final Crisis did it, where it like is that literal thing where is an equation that robs people of free will and they become Darkseid zombies. And that's like Grant Morrison's take, is like the literal use of the anti-life equation. This comic is instead just kind of placing depression as the anti-life equation. So anyway, I mean, I know
which
I'm
I think,
out of issue
well, I mean, on
already.
that note about the Darkseid is panels, like those panels coming when he's at his weakest moments, like, and assuming the end of this arc is true, because again, not everything in this comic that you read is on face value, but like assuming that he does have the anti-life equation within him, meaning the lack of will to live and the suicide and all that, it all kind of plays in, like, meaning like Darkseid is panels are just basically him in his darkest moment, and there's a ton of them in this first issue. It does lessen as it goes on.
I think it's like it's like a little subconscious thing in his head, that it's like it's his trauma, like it's his subconscious trauma popping back up. And I think that's why it lessens as the story goes on, because I think he's kind of throughout the process learning to deal with the trauma and
well, also he's like, well, yeah, maybe he's dealing with the depression, but also he's making a life for himself. Like he's having a child. He's, I mean, fighting in a war, yes, but at the same time, to him, that's just his day job. He doesn't really think of it that way.
Have you two ever seen the movie Melancholia?
Oh, no, I never saw it.
So, well, first of all, strongly recommend it. It's one of the best on-screen depictions of depression of all time. But long story short, one of the big motifs in the movie is a second planet that is going to crash into the Earth after a certain amount of days. And throughout the movie, it gets closer and closer. And the end of the movie is the planet crashing and destroying all life. And I think the Darkseid is like phrase and panels are the same thing as the planet in Melancholia. I think it's like, it's a representation of just the oppressive and ever-present nature of depression. Like that's what Darkseid is. It's just like this like shadow that's always there.
Or just like mental health in general, because I think there's something to the fact, and now we're jumping again, but when he kind of accuses Orion, or doesn't accuse him, but asks him if he is also infected by the anti-life equation.
Yeah.
Like Orion is just like kind of a narcissist, egomaniac based on this book, but he's also like, you can kind of see how insecure he is and how threatened he is by like he's got his own like mental issues.
Everything he does with Scott throughout this entire series is because he feels inferior to Scott.
Right. Yeah.
Like he puts him on the front lines, he separates him from his wife in the war.
But it is
constantly puts him in horrible situations. He sends him from one battle to the next without reprieve. Like he interrupts his, like he does have leave at one point and they're back on Earth, and then he interrupts it and pulls him back early. Like constant just fucking with him. Yeah. Even to the point where there's just the punching in the face and saying stand. Like he's just been like, fuck you the whole time. He's just like trying to prove that he's more than Scott. And it's so obvious that he's not, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think it is.
They dedicate an entire page to Darkseid is in this issue.
Oh yeah, right before they get boom tube, right? Yeah,
yeah, and it's right after the conversation with Orion. So they're on that Orion conversation when he's like, Highfather's dead and blah blah blah. Like you need to come, kind of thing. There's 5 out of 9 panels on that page are Darkseid is. And then the very next page is all black and it just says Darkseid is. Like there's a lot.
Was a phrase, like was it in the original New Gods run? Was it like a phrase that's been in DC?
I don't know if it goes that far back. To my knowledge, I want to say it was the Grant Morrison run on JLA is the first time I saw it, but like I don't know if that's from before. I mean, like he might not have come up with that. I didn't read a lot of New God stuff when I was young, you know. So like that was kind of, and that was like early 90s. Or mid 90s maybe. When was the Justice League run with 95 maybe? Yeah.
It started like in mid to late 90s.
Yeah.
But I do feel like I heard Darkseid is before this book. If it's
there's definitely Darkseid is in that run for sure. There's that one run where I think it's called the Dark Ages or the Stone Age or something like that. And like there's basically a Darkseid storyline in the Justice League story, and he kind of already wins. It's that whole cool storyline.
Yeah, they're all.
Yeah.
Someone gets into the future. Flash.
Batman's Desaad and like all that stuff's going on.
I'm reading online.
They have Darkseid is like on billboards and spray painted on walls like all over the earth at that point.
Right.
But so I'm reading online, and Darkseid is. It looks like it did start here.
Are you serious?
There's no way. I literally know of a book.
So here's all right.
Decades ago.
I'm going to quote Tom King. Begin quote. I want to credit a webcomic artist named Julian Little. He's an old friend of mine, and we met at a con. I was telling him about Mr. Miracle, and he said, Darkseid is. And I said, what do you mean Darkseid is? And then the quote continues with, like, what that means to him. Is it a Mandela effect? This could be a Mandela effect.
Could be Mandela effect.
There was definitely a like Darkseid blank definitive statement in that storyline, but maybe I'm just like misremembering it and it was something else than is. But I swear it was is. What else would it be? Darkseid M. Oh, are you Bizarro Darkseid?
Darkseid.
Darkseid M. His Omega Beam's shooting a straight line.
That's the difference. Rock of Ages. That's what I'm thinking of.
Well, the only other thing I want to mention about issue 1 is like Highfather's such a piece of shit. Like he's such a piece of shit because
he really is.
He keeps bringing up Orion, and Scott's like, "That's not my brother," and Highfather kind of scolds him for that, and it's like, you've taken no accountability for the fact that you just handed over Scott to Darkseid when he was a baby. I just felt like that whole, like, I kind of breezed through it the first time because I was like, whatever exposition about what's happening on New Genesis, but he really is like a terrible, terrible father. Issue 2, I wanted to talk about Barda. This is when they meet Granny.
Yeah, that's some fucked up shit.
Because
we discussed that a little bit.
Yeah, but I didn't really like view things from Barda's perspective, but like she seems to have her shit together more so than Scott, but I think she's so busy taking care of Scott that she's never really had a chance to figure her shit out.
Isn't that always the case? The woman's got her shit together and the useless man is down in the dumps with his self-centered depression. and it's the woman who's got to raise the kid, raise the adult husband.
I mean, my wife is taking care of me, and she's putting our child to bed right now as we speak. So
there we go. I mean,
you know,
but it's Barda does have this strange character arc because Scott and Granny say something about like how pretty she is, and both times she reacts by saying I'm too tall. And then Granny's actually super sweet with her, saying that like, don't you know everyone's too something or something like that. Okay,
Right.
so
yeah, but you can't trust anything that comes out of Granny's mouth. She's a manipulator.
well, that's what, and I didn't really like. So Granny's talking to Scott, and Barda comes in. She clearly can probably see them talking to each other, and she just bludgeons the shit out of her, like violently beats the crap out of her. And then when you look at the panels before they boom off, like Barda looks at Scott like, what the fuck? And Scott has this huge frown on his face. And I can't tell if he's frowning because of what Barda did or because he knows like how disappointed Barda is in him. But I mean, it goes from this weird moment with Granny and Barda being like, Granny being somewhat supportive in a weird way, to Barda having like all this pent up trauma against her where in the panels, it's like black and Barda silhouettes in white, and there's just blood going everywhere.
oh yeah, yeah.
It's just insane. But yeah, because I was so focused on Scott, like the first read through, that I didn't really pay attention to everything Barda was kind of like.
Also,
the
I mean,
small
from
character arc
Scott's
with her.
perspective, I know he loves his wife, and I get that. But watching, I mean, and we all know Granny's a fucking evil piece of shit, and she sucks. But
I don't know.
he,
So
for
I've
some
always
reason,
had
has
good
like some
experiences
part of
with
him thinks of her as like a parental figure.
Yeah.
How, no matter how tiny that may be, he thinks of her that way, and he just watches his wife just cave her head in. I mean, like that, and he was looking right in the face when it happened. Like it's not like he was out of the room. Like that right there is traumatic. You know what I mean? Like it's not only is he in these like weird depression throughout this series, but like every time he starts to feel a little better, something fucked up happens like right in front of his face. And you're just like, Jesus Christ, like.
I feel like you react to violence with either fear or anger. And I feel like Scott reacts more with fear and Barda reacts more with anger. It's kind of like two examples of what can happen to an abused kid.
I mean, the other complication, though, is given sort of the whole setup of the series, Barda, I mean, might not be Barda. It
Right.
might
So,
be
yeah.
part of Scott that he's
Yeah.
like creating as Barda or his image of Barda. So it might not be a literal separate person.
It might just be a different
Who's
part
reacting.
of Scott's. Yeah.
That's an interesting note on that topic. I mean, I'd like, coming from a pure reader standpoint of just I enjoy comic books, I would love to believe that this is somehow canon or like is real, even if it's not like our Earth or whatever. Like, and he's gonna like wake up and be back on our Earth or something at some point. But just because I hate reading, not that I hate reading stories that are like weird and different, but it's like I just love this story so much that I'm like, oh, it'd be such a shame if that wasn't part of like canon, you know.
I think the thing for me at the end though, when Oberon is like, none of this stuff is real. Like this reality you're in now is as real as any other reality because DC reboots their universe every like 5 years.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's kind of a meta way of saying like, fuck it, this is real. I don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about it last episode, but right, that idea of how like they're kind of playing with continuity at the end and sort of like wink, wink. They're going to reset anyway.
Yeah.
Nothing's real.
Yeah.
Well, real quick, I need to show you guys this. Hold on. So this is a panel or the cover of JLA number 14. That was January 1998. It says Darkseid is gigantically on the cover of the comic.
And I guess we know more than Tom King.
Tom King's gonna be so mad.
Tom.
Or is that image you just showed us part of the Mandela effect? That we didn't actually even see that, but our memory of that is also affected by the overall.
Why would I remember that and then that doesn't make any sense?
I mean, it's all part of the Mandela effect, dude.
I don't believe in that. It's Berenstein.
This manufactured.
Okay, so issue 3, all I'll say is I reread that, and again, the first like 2 times I read this, I was focused on Scott. This last time I read it, I was more focused on Barda and Orion. And Scott tells that crazy Christmas story about the kid who gets gassed and he's at the bottom of the pile. And the only reason he survives is because everyone else goes before him and dies. And with that, after that story, it immediately leads into the scene where Forager comes to Scott and is like, Orion is killing all of my people by sending us to the front lines. And so I kind of assume that whole story is kind of a parallel to Orion and how he's kind of too cowardly to go to the front line and he's sending everyone else to
and where is Scott every time
him.
He's fighting? He's like right in front of all his people screaming for New Genesis and covered in blood and barely surviving the fight and getting hurt.
I remember reading that story and being like, well, that's interesting, but I'm not sure how it relates to what's happening right now. And then this last time I read it, I was like, oh, it's not about Scott. It's about Orion, I think. And the other just random thing that happens in the third issue is that girl comes up to Scott and Barda on the street and she wants to have a selfie with them. And she says, everyone loves Barda. She goes, I love Big Barda or something like that. And Barda responds saying, doesn't everyone? And it kind of made me feel like
not
Barda,
everyone does.
Well, no, the fact that like every time Barda would get a compliment, she would say she was too tall up until then. And then after she killed Granny and like, maybe she's cathartic. Stronger. And now she's kind of like, she just is like, well, doesn't everyone love me? You know what I mean?
She does seem to kind of, I mean, of all the characters in this book, she is the most stable. Like she has the flattest arc. Like she doesn't, but that could be like the slightest bit of a hump in terms of like, I was in a place at the beginning, but as of issue 2, I killed Granny, so I'm kind of good now, you know, kind of thing. Like that was all I needed to move on. But who is Orion to her? Like who are Forager and the bugs to her? No one. Like who is anyone to her? Nothing. All she cares about is Scott. She has Scott. Enemy. Real quick before we move on, just in a general overarching whole series kind of comment, do you guys have any comments on the random escapes that are peppered throughout the whole series, like, and what that has to do with anything, if anything at all, other than just him being like, I'm an escape artist and we're going to show you some random crap? Because they seem to pop up like when he's feeling vulnerable almost as much as the dark side is thing. Like it'll cut away to one of those like watching him almost die, but then he's like, I'm fine, you know, kind of thing, like right at the end.
I don't know. I just thought those were like slice of life vignettes of what his Earth life was like.
Yeah. I guess that's kind of how I took that too. I was also thinking about the way he fights, and every time he's in combat, like he always like escapes. Like he's not like the greatest fighter in the world, although he is fighting and wins a lot. But like,
can I ask
it's like a lot of the fights he barely gets out, I guess is what I'm saying. Like he gets wounded and then like crawls out from under a body and then like he gets away.
Can I ask a question that isn't like about thematic stuff or whatever? I don't understand like what are new gods? Because like Darkseid's as strong as Superman, right? Are all new gods like that? What are their powers?
I think in general, it's basically if you took like regular Earth, but everyone there had super strength, super speed, and like enhanced endurance. And then you had random people like Light Ray that have like meta abilities. But I think like Scott just naturally has like super, like I think he's stronger and faster than any human would be. But then I think there's also like the metagene on their world where
in terms of somebody that's on Earth, like they're godlike beings, but in terms of like all of them together, like they're the same. Like when Orion punches him in the face, he bleeds because it's Orion and they're both gods. You know what I mean?
But like if I were to punch him in the face,
he'd probably laugh and like be like, that tickled, you know? Because you have like
which kind of makes me wonder,
weak body, and your bones are like filled with air. You know,
I think that's why they have to like find alien devices to make his escape tricks like even worth watching.
They like because they search the galaxy for like shit that you can't get out of, kind of thing. Yeah. Issue 4, trial. What exactly about the trial do you guys want to discuss in depth, aside from it being a very awesome issue? I love Barda beating the crap out of Light Ray, because that's like my favorite.
I was gonna say it's like a common theme, and not that I blame her whatsoever. She's under a lot of stress.
Yeah,
but like Barda responds to any problem with violence. She just immediately starts beating the shit out of Light Ray.
She's Granny's daughter.
Yeah.
Also, he did come into their home and be like,
that's what I'm saying. Hey, that's what I'm saying. but it's
But
still
Ryan's
like
putting you on trial. We all know this is going to be fucking bullshit, and you're probably going to die at the end of it. She's like, "Fuck you," like,
Scott's making coffee, and Barda is literally beating the shit out of Light Ray in the living room. It's like, what is happening?
Again, there's little tiny moments like that, like Scott sipping on coffee while Light Ray is bleeding and then gets punched again and again, and he's just like, okay, well, so when do you want to do that? And he keeps drinking his coffee like nothing's happening, and it's like this little insights into like how fucked up their childhood was with Granny and Darkseid, because like they just shit like that happens in front of them, and they're like, anyway, so when does he want to do the trial? Wednesday doesn't work for me. How about Thursday? Like kind of, it's like, it's amazing how insane also, that kind of shit is.
Going back to the like the very first few panels, I think after he's committed suicide is when he's a little kid and he draws the face of God or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And that comes back right here. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's pouring his coffee mug says "I am God" on it. I've been trying to figure out that whole theme.
The face of God part.
Well, is it just kind of like he's God? He's not supposed to see the true face of God. Does that mean he's like not supposed to truly see his own like who he truly is? Like, is it?
That's an interesting thought because of the whole fucking mirror thing that he gets from Granny later too.
Yeah. But anyways, back to the trial. I kind of thought it was more about Orion than it was about Scott, because just going back to him being like an insecure, like narcissist, egomaniac, he makes himself the prosecution and the defense. And
what a fucking douche!
Like, and so then when Scott. He limits
it's
him
things like that show how
false.
inferior he is, because he can't, even though he has all the power to like give those roles to other people, he chooses them all for himself because he can't trust anyone else to decide what he's going to decide, which is to fucking kill him.
I just like the contrast in, because again, playing into a little bit of that idea of, is this all fabricated in Scott's mind or not? But just because if you look at Scott and he's very, Granny Goodness, well, she was kind of nice to me, but she was evil. How do I feel about my dad? Like, he's very nuanced and unsure about things. And as a contrast, Orion like speaks only like in binary. He just says like everything's true or false. Everything's like black or white. There is no nuance. Like, do you have hate in you? Is hate the anti-life equation? Are you the anti-life equation? It's all just this like binary tree that leads down to.
He just directs him where,
right.
He just, whatever answer Scott gives he doesn't like, he'll ask a different question, knowing Scott will have to answer it in a certain way.
Right. Yeah.
Be like,
I don't care what you don't know, and you're just like, I'm allowed to not know if something's true or false.
He goes to one point. He goes to one point.
Some people just don't know the answers to things.
There's one point where he asks, "Are you an agent of Darkseid, true or false?" And Scott says false, and then he goes, "Now, an agent of Darkseid would deny he was such an agent, true or false." And Scott's
like, let me have a string of questions.
Well, I love the last page of the issue is really good, because like the way Scott's drawn, he just looks like a ragdoll dummy.
Oh yeah.
Like a human body as Barda holds him. I just really like how that last page is set up.
I love the second to last page because he knocks down Orion, and then Orion just goes. Orion goes, Jesus, and then he grabs a carrot.
And then he finally eats a carrot.
And he's like, "I'm gonna execute you tomorrow, I guess. Bye."
You will. He's like, "You'll report to the throne in 3 days, and that's when I'll kill you."
I just feel like it's so. The artwork and the dialogue is so fucking good, because they're literally talking like that was such a heavy issue, and then the end is like, I can't stop laughing at that. I almost want to print this out in a large frame and put it on my wall.
It's a phenomenal page.
Part of the issue that I really liked was just the part where Scott talks about like he doesn't have a name.
Yes.
Like I thought that was really good, because he was like, Scott Free is what Granny called me, and Mr. Miracle is what they called me on the stupid planet, but I don't know what my name was. Like Highfather never.
And then I think that
which again, they talk about the parents on Apocalypse being shitty. Highfather was a piece of shit.
Awful. He's fucking awful.
It's just like
Scott
Go
even
ahead,
says,
sorry.
like, I didn't think to ask him. And it's like, why should you have even had to ask him? He should have just fucking referred to you as what your name was the
Yes,
first time
yeah.
y'all reunited. Like, Highfather is the worst.
Yeah. And he's
Awful
barely
man.
in it. It's just
Yeah.
like this elusive father figure. I mean, he's in it as much as he was in Scott's life, you know, like he's a baby.
Right.
Here you go,
Yeah.
you know, here you go, dark side, you know, kind of thing. Like, but it's also kind of fucked up because he like cares about his opinions and shit. And you're just like, why do you give a fuck about this guy? Issue number 5. So the whole point of the issue is kind of whether he should fight this or not. And they're
Right.
kind of working off the assumption that he's not going to fight it the entire time.
Yeah.
And that's why she's so upset at the very end, because she knows it's like the night before he has to leave and go die. And it's kind of, I mean, and which is all kind of fucked up. And then they come for him kind of in the middle of the night that night, and they're like, hey, it's time to go. You're going to die. And that's when she fucking murders those guards and is like, I want you to stay. And it's like really interesting, this like moment of like her kind of going,
she made the decision,
making the realization that she can't like be without him, kind of thing, which is really awesome. Because again, her character is very flatlined almost this whole book, but there are little moments, and Granny dying was one of them. And you're like, oh, she turned a page. But like I was saying earlier, she needs Scott to be like normal, to feel okay. Because then she'll just be Granny. She'll just be left with war and death and like nothing else.
But this point also mirrors like what happened in quote unquote real life at the beginning was Scott killed himself and she found him and saved it. And it's the same thing repeating here, where he's sort of giving up and kind of like, all right, I'll just let me be executed. And she's the one who drags him back and says, no, you know, it's not.
Yeah.
Well, because she's always has to be, and I think, and it leads up to, we'll get to it, but the issue when she finally like loses her shit on him, but it's like she always has to be the stronger one to make like the rational decision for what's best for them. And I think it kind of gives like, it's so focused on Scott and his depression, but you look at Barda and you kind of see the toll that depression can take on a person's like loved ones that's around them. Like it's something like depression is something like you can't cheer someone up. It's and it's just like she's trying to deal with it the best way she can. But you're right. Like I think without Scott, like what is she? Like
it's not that she's not a human or not. There's nothing left to her.
I mean, she's the dark side.
Yeah, she's just without Scott anchoring that like normal part of her life, quote unquote. Like all she has is fighting and death and like the war and like endless. Like there's no kid when that is coming along, kind of thing, and like, you know, like there's no like family, like, you know, like no one loves her. The other like, Furies like care about her in a weird fucked up way, but not
and like I don't know too much about her backstory, but like I feel like the main reason she defected was for Scott, and like she had respect for Scott trying to escape all those years, and like I think without Scott it's like her family is the Furies. Unless y'all have some additional input on issue 6 when they're going to kill Orion or whatever, and they're talking about the condo. I feel like we covered that pretty in depth. Other than the fact that I think it's my favorite issue of the entire
again, hands down my favorite issue. But so it seems weird that we're skipping over it right now. But I will say we did cover it in very, very great detail last time.
Oh, I will say we didn't talk about this. She says that she's pregnant. Scott hugs her and says, "I love you," and then she says, I believe you scot-free. She doesn't say I love you back. And it's like this weird thing where I feel like she doesn't actually believe him because he just tried to kill himself. Like, if you really loved me, like, why would you kill yourself and leave me in this like pit of misery? But again, that kind of comes full circle because later on he says, I love you again. And she says, I love you too. I forget what issue that happens in, but she does have this like subtle story arc that I totally glossed over the first time I read through it. But that's the only new piece of
it's a very nuanced and layered book, and it's like one of those,
it's insanely
that's why we love it so much. So I mean there's a lot of layers here, so like unless you go back and read it again, your brain kind of takes a lot of things at face value, and until you read the end you're going like, what's going on the whole time? So you're trying to figure out the mystery part of it too, or like, is he dead, is he alive, I don't know what's going on. And then when you finally get to the end, if you don't go back and reread it, you're gonna miss all those little like subtle clues.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
What do you think about him yelling? I mean, because we didn't really touch on this part of this issue last time, but the "what did you do?" and he's screaming, "What did you do?" and Darkseid says, "Darkseid does not do," and then the next panel is a Darkseid is panel.
Oh.
And then at the end, he's freaking out, and then Barda's like, "Scott, what happened?" And he's like, "I saw the face of God." And I'm kind of going like, did he see Darkseid really there? That's why I was confused if Orion like killed himself the same way Scott did. Because did Scott just tell her that he saw Darkseid and that's what happened? Or is that actually what happened? Or did Orion have the anti-life equation in him as in depression and kill himself the same way Scott did?
I was about
to
say,
didn't get there in time? Because that's what I took away from that the first time.
It's almost like maybe the pressure of being Highfather drove him insane and he killed himself. But I feel like they say something
because the panel of Darkseid sitting in that room is like jumbled and scraped up and has all the lines through it, and it's not like reality almost. Like it's like those panels that go and blur, and you're like, and that was the only panel of it, and that's the only indication we have whatsoever that Darkseid was actually behind Orion's death.
Well, I don't.
And it just kind of left me going like,
I mean, I don't know if it's supposed to be one literal thing. Like either Darkseid killed him or he I think it is supposed to be a little bit open to.
Or just like the fact that, I mean, again, just going, Scott got the actual trauma, but Orion is the actual son of Darkseid, the most evil being like in the universe. So the fact that he says Darkseid does not do, like it, the fact that he knows he's the son, it'd be like knowing you're the son of Satan or something. Like you could easily become this tyrant just like your father, which he kind of was becoming,
which he was,
so maybe he did kill himself. Did he kill himself? I don't know.
I think he killed. I mean, like I see it that way, and I read it that way the first time, but when we were discussing it I was like, oh well, maybe he didn't. And that was kind of the first time that I even like thought of that, you know, because you guys brought it up. But anyway, we're spending too much time on this issue again. It's a great issue.
It's a great issue. Oh, the birth. So here's something, the birth, the only thing I'll add to this is that I just did some research about it. So when the baby's born, Scott says, I don't know, he looks more like just a lump. And then in big letters, orange letters, it says the lump over the baby's face. Apparently there's an actual villain called the Lump in the New Gods history that was made by Granny, and it's like it's able to entrap you into a like alternate reality and mess with your brain. So now there's like this
shit. Seriously?
Well, because it says the Lump, and then it says only Scott Free has a chance to survive the Battle of the Id. So it's kind of like the Lump has created this child that Scott is now just naturally protective of and doesn't want to leave. So
those like, weird narration panels at the beginning and end of each issue does make it seem so not like it's really happening. Like it's kind of just like, what's gonna happen next time on Mr. Miracle, you know, kind of thing. And you're just like, what is that? What is that? Is that like shit playing in his brain? Like what? Because it's so jarring and out of place, and it refers to shit a lot, like
the paranoid pill or whatever.
Yeah, the paranoid pill and shit like that, and all this like other shit, and you're just like, what is going on with that?
But it could just be a metaphor that like
I love that the lump is actually a fucking thing. I did not know that. That's really funny.
I had no idea.
It might just be a reference to the lump without like an actual deeper.
Well, that's what it's kind of
very possible.
Or like a metaphor saying that like once you have a child, like you're so invested in that child's life that everything else kind of fades away, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
The battle of the id, like his natural paternal instincts to stay with the baby is what's keeping him from leaving purgatory or wherever he's at and going back to the real world.
Guys, we had so much Mr. Miracle to talk about. I'm so glad we did part 2. So much more Mr. Miracle.
I think we did plenty the first time, you
know. You always think that, Al.
I think the first time was plenty. All right, Pat, what's next on the tour?
I jumped to issue 9, the negotiations again. just because of the bone wine scene, because I thought it's totally fucked up, but it's kind of hilarious when Bart is drinking the bone wine and Mr. Miracle's like, you know what the secret ingredient is in that, right? And he's like, it's the blood of new gods. And Bart is just like silent for a moment, and then she takes a big swig and she's like, yeah, I used to brew it with Granny and the Fury.
Yeah, I know. You know what's in that, right? People.
She just, yeah.
And then, which, when you think about it, like the blood of new gods or the bone marrow of new gods or whatever, you're just like, oh, well, what is a new god? It doesn't really mean anything to us because we're humans. But if I was drinking fucking wine made from human beings, and you were like, you know, it's made from people, right? And I was like, oh yeah, I made it when I was a kid.
Well, that's what the Clintons and the Obamas drink in the pizza parlor.
Fucking way.
Yeah. They drink human blood.
Oh shit.
Make themselves immortal.
Do you want to? Well, should we do something about it?
Human children blood,
Q
not like not adults.
That's true. Yeah, but Q's trying to stop it, Joe, to answer your question.
Oh, okay. Well, who's this Q guy? How can I get in touch with him? Seems like something I
have to go on Reddit.
Let's not talk about politics.
Oh, okay.
Unless it's the politics of New Genesis and Apocalypse.
Oh, and then just the mirror. I think we talked about the mirror, but she says that specific quote about what Granny would say, that on the outside you're beautiful and on the inside you're mine. That is so fucked up. Like, I mean, it's like obviously just a metaphor for all the trauma she put them through and how traumatizing them makes them her property, basically.
Fucked them up.
It's like,
you might be beautiful on the outside, but I've fucked you up, and I know I did that.
Well, that's
I own it.
It was such an interesting take to be like, yeah, we were tortured, and then she would have like plastic surgery done to us so we'd look pretty again, so that she could torture us again. It's really messed up.
Yeah, I mean,
almost like she should be like, you know, in charge of children on some sort of a hell planet.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you don't want to talk about politics, but I just wanted to mention that in the Snyder Cut, Granny Goodness looks like Liz Warren.
Yeah, what is that? What was that?
She looks exactly like Senator Elizabeth Warren.
I really didn't like pause it and look at her, but just superficially glancing over a frame of her when you guys said that, I was like, that is not a lie. That is very true.
Exactly like her. Because someone tweeted it, and I thought someone had photoshopped it, and then when I saw the actual Snyder Cut, I was like, "What is happening? Why does she look like that?" Everyone else,
Zack Snyder's making a statement.
Literally, everyone else, even Desaad, who's usually a
looks like a demon,
looks like a monster, and then you have Elizabeth Warren there. Like, what is happening?
It is weird. Like, why is she not a monster? Everybody else is a space monster.
Or at least like a really scary, like, she looks like Elizabeth Warren. She's got the short haircut. I think she has glasses.
No, I don't know. I don't
know if she has glasses. I don't remember.
Well, in my memory, she's got glasses on. I don't know.
She should be like a fucking like just triple 1,000-chinned goblin woman. If you know, following the motif of like Desaad looks like a human, but now he's a demon, you know, like going in that direction, she should look like some freakish orc woman.
Something.
Well, that's the thing about the Snyder Cut. Like, I don't like that.
No, we're talking about this later. No,
we'll talk about this.
I just want to make that comment.
No Snyder Cut comments.
I don't like how they're all monsters. Just wanted to make that comment. I'd rather they were more human.
All right, you don't like they're all monsters. Moving on.
I skipped to after the negotiations is when they're debating whether or not to give up their kid, and I don't think we touched on the fact that it was kind of funny to see Scott getting shit faced with Booster Gold and Blue Beetle.
Yeah, that was fun.
But we did
not really talk about that a lot.
It's just bizarre, and it's like, he's literally talking about giving his son to the devil, and Booster Gold and Blue Beetle will be like, "It'll be okay, man. Yeah, whatever you decide, we're here for you, you know?" It's like, you're talking about whether or not you're going to go to like...
Fucking bizarre conversation.
It's so bizarre. It is so bizarre.
On that note, though, like the lack of help from his friends, maybe like it makes more sense with the whole like conversation with a guy at Party City that gives him better advice almost.
Yeah.
like kind of thing. You're just like, he went and got shit faced with his friends, told him all about his troubles, and all they could say was like, you know what, buddy, we're here for you, whatever you decide. And he's like, what?
It was funny how the boom tube is like a Uber because he's like,
and it just kept, and he's like, now it's his 4
yeah,
minutes.
yeah. He's like, we'll be here in 3 minutes. Oh, now it's his 4 minutes.
that was spectacular. Little like,
Yeah, it was a good
and
one.
I love the little bit of like, isn't it supposed to be instant? He's like, I don't know. His lack of knowledge of how the technology works on the like not working the shower we joked about last episode, just like the little things like that. I'm just like, this is such a bizarre like little insight into like, which is almost weirder because you're just like, well, how are you escaping all these alien death traps if you don't even understand how to turn the shower on? But it's really funny. I like those little moments.
The other page in that issue that was, I don't think we talked about, was when he's in the shower and Bart is talking about planning the birthday, and like each panel he slowly just starts falling to the ground, and by the end he's just in a total fetal position. Like, this issue was very hard to read because, I mean, this is probably my second favorite issue after the condo renovation issue.
Hilariously enough, I completely agree. Easily my second favorite issue.
Because this is kind of where Barda's story arc comes full circle when they're in the park and Scott's like, you were raised in the apocalypse and so was I. We turned out fine. And she's like, we were fucking prisoners. Granny tortured us. We weren't happy. And then she kind of refers to the suicide about how he was trying to escape her and that she's insane. Like, he's insane, but she's insane for staying with him. And then there was a really like powerful line when she says, he goes, oh, well, Scott says something along the lines like, we got through it. And she says, oh, he goes, yeah, we got through it. She goes, no, we didn't. We are it. And he isn't. Like, saying that she isn't going to give her son up. But I thought that was like a pretty, like they didn't get through it. They're still all traumatized and messed up. That's why Scott tried to kill himself. That's why she can't like function without Scott.
The mere fact that he's so deluded that he thinks they're okay.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, fucking idiot, we're not okay. Like, we barely get through anything, like a daily life. Hence you tried to kill yourself, kind of thing.
When it's like, yeah, because she kind of brings up the suicide. He's like, that's not fair. Like, almost like you're not allowed to talk about it because he's mentally unwell. And she's like, fuck you. I'm also mentally unwell.
Yeah.
But I can't deal with it.
But I deal with my shit because I'm constantly dealing with you.
But going back to Barda, after she vents to Scott like that, this is the first time where he says, I love you. And she says, I love you too, like a few pages after that. So it is kind of like she is having this very subtle character development arc. And then they immediately decide after that to, kill Darkseid. Yeah, that's pretty much all I've got to say about it.
I don't think Scott could survive without her just as much as I don't think she could survive without Scott. On that note.
Well, he like on a literal level could not survive without her because
he'll always escape, Al.
He would be dead if not for her, and several times.
Well, it's kind of messed up because he says the reason he committed suicide was after Oberon died. And it's like, I guess from her point of view, it's like this old man. I mean, I get that it was your mentor, but it's like, I'm your wife and you're just going to leave me because of Oberon's death, who died from lung cancer because he smoked cigars nonstop every day. Like, I can see, I feel like she might be my favorite character in the entire book now.
Yeah. She kind of is. I mean, she's up there for sure. I don't know if she's my favorite, but she might be. She might be. I do like the random, not playing off the name of this fucking podcast, but the random times Metron's in it is so fucking weird and bizarre.
Yeah. He's always been a weird, bizarre character, though.
Well, he just like goes around time in his chair, right? And just shows up every once in a while to...
Pretty much. He's like Brainiac.
And go away again.
Like, isn't his whole reason for existence is to acquire knowledge or something?
Yeah. So on that note, issue 11, where Metron does show up again, which is the Darkseid ambush episode or issue. We talked about this one quite in depth, so I don't know if we want to really. Is there anything you guys want to discuss here that we didn't touch on last episode?
I don't really understand Metron being like. I don't know. I don't understand him being there exactly. And again, there is the scene like the first issue, I think, where it's like old Metron saying you're not to know the face of God. And then this Metron is being like, you've completed your cycle. You know who you are now. Like, again, going back to the point where it's like.
Also, Scott, it's really fucked up because it's like a reveal. Like, he's Dassad and he sits on Darkseid's throne and he flips up the hood and it's actually Metron. And then he's like, this is a reality. Come back to it. You did it, buddy. And then, like, the next issue, it's like, he didn't go anywhere. And you're just like, what's going on?
Yeah. The carrots are just perfect, though. Because.
Darkseid, getting to watch Darkseid die, however not in canon this must be, was pretty fucking cool.
It was cool, yeah.
Which we didn't really touch on that last time either. Just fucking stabbing him in the fucking eye, and then
Darkseid's died 2 or 3 times, hasn't he? Already?
He dies.
Yeah, but I don't. If he has, I've never really. I don't think we've seen it. I think there's been storylines when he's not alive or something, or like Darkseid's dead, and this is what's going on.
Because he was dead at the beginning of Final Crisis, because that's why he had to like inject his mind into the Earth Detective or some dumb shit. Like however he came back in Final Crisis.
I thought it was an interesting.
I didn't like Final Crisis.
Final Crisis was
I don't think anyone did.
Insane.
None of it makes sense. I will say I thought it was interesting because the prophecy is always about how Darkseid's son is going to kill him, and it's obvious, like everyone always thinks it's Orion, and to flip it and be like, no, it's actually Scott because he's the one that was actually like he's the
actual son because
he's the actual son. Yeah, Orion.
But also, it's a knife made of Orion, technically.
That too. So yeah,
I like how Scott kind of makes it make sense in his own brain that way because I think part of him doesn't want to admit that he's Darkseid's son.
Oh yeah, totally.
Good, but in reality, it's like it's because you're wielding the knife, dummy. It has nothing to do with the fact that the knife is made from Orion.
Yeah, but I think in actual continuity, I think it was Orion that killed Darkseid, or one of the times he died.
Well, in Kingdom Come, I think he did kill Darkseid, and then he just kind of became Darkseid, but that's no longer canon.
Is Kingdom Come ever canon?
It is interesting. Yeah, it was. I think they made it like the actual DC future for like a decade, and then they were like, no.
Anytime they make a future storyline and like they're like, this is canon. I'm like, no, it's not. You're gonna change this in 2 years.
Do y'all have any other comments on the book, or should we close the chapter on Mr. Miracle?
Again, just an incredible run. Like one of the best.
I mean, it really is. It's fantastic.
The past 10 years, like by far.
The pacing is perfect. Let's put it that way. It never feels like we spend too much time in one place, constantly jumping back and forth because the boom tomb technology makes it possible. So you're constantly just like, oh, we're back on Earth. Oh, we're back on here.
Yeah.
It's a really well paced story with a lot of nuance, and it's just fucking really well read.
Well, and the art is, I mean, I like Mitch, I can't pronounce his last name, but Mitch G's art.
Gerads.
I can't imagine liking it more with someone else's art, which says a lot. So, I mean, like if I read a comic and I'm like, if only this guy drew that comic, kind of thing. That would be better if this guy was on this book. But this art is fantastic.
Do you think, I don't know if it's the art or just the technology, because going back and reading like 90s comics, there is so much dialogue. And I wonder if like there's less dialogue in these books now because the art is so good and you're able to convey, like I feel like there's thought bubbles.
Yes, absolutely. Because if you go back before the 90s, it's the same thing. Like 80s books, it's even more. Like because when I was reading 90s books, you'd go back and read old books and you'd just be like, Jesus Christ, could they talk a little less? What is that?
They had to narrate every single.
They had to narrate fucking everything. And then like the narration blocks have gotten so. It's almost weird when you see a narration block in a comic now.
But I did some research into the movie that they were making and
the New Gods movie.
This is a good segue into Justice League. I don't know if it was like the deciding factor or just the straw that broke the camel's back, But I read a few things online saying that the reason the New Gods movie got canceled was because Darkseid was going to be the main villain. And the fact that he was in Snyder's Justice League cut is the reason they canceled it, because they don't want anything to do with the Snyderverse. So, and I looked at it, the Snyder cut was released on March 18th. They announced the New Gods were being canceled on April 1st. So it makes sense.
Oh my God.
And so the movie, because it was going to be, is it Ava DuVernay was, so here's the thing too about her. I don't know too much about her, but she was hired a year before Tom King. She read Mr. Miracle in preparation for making the movie. And
God
she was
blessed.
like, and she brought Tom King in because of how good this book was. And the movie was going to feature the female Furies. And Ava said her favorite superhero is Big Barda. So I feel like it was going to be like a really awesome movie. And I feel like this would be a great miniseries, but I would love a movie where it's just Big Barda leaving.
Holy fuck! That once again, we need the topic. The topic we have in our brains that we want to talk about in depth is all the movies they could make and how they should be making them and what they're fucking up constantly. Snyder Cut has a big part of that, and then also this movie is a perfect example of like, why the fuck did you cancel that movie?
Yeah,
like stupid. It sounds so good.
DuVernay and Tom King would have been like a great combo. It would have been.
And it's like, doesn't it take a few years to like? I feel like people would have forgotten. People binged the Snyderverse movie.
People would have forgotten instantly.
Now. Like, why?
Well, but the scuttlebutt is that they want to leave it open in case they choose to go back to the Snyderverse.
Oh, fuck that.
They've literally said 10 times that they aren't doing that though, well, which again means nothing.
Yeah, but I mean, Joe, first of all, the incompetence of the DC movie boardroom is pretty clear, but the scuttlebutt is that not everybody is so done with Snyder there, and they want to leave it open in case they do go back to it.
Then just make it. And also, I feel like Into the Spider-Verse kind of set the standard that audiences can understand a really complex storyline and enjoy it.
And also not only, I mean, if that had been live action even, wouldn't have fucked anybody's brains up. The fact that it was animated may have made it easier for them to separate, like, oh, that Spider-Man's a different Spider-Man, and blah, 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 blah. But it's like DC just say that they've already established the fact that the Batman with Robert Pattinson isn't in the same universe. Like, you're already making a multiverse. Same with Joker. And then the fact that on the surface, at the very least, what you just described as the New Gods movie could literally happen anytime. So what the fuck does it matter if Darkseid, as long as he looks relatively the same or something, if you wanted to go back to it. And if he doesn't look at all the same, just go, okay, like that's what he looked like for 100 years, 3,000 years ago. Who gives a shit? But if a movie was about Big Barda, it could happen anytime.
They might have also just decided to not do the movie because they'd rather focus on like known quantities like Flash or whatever, and just not take the risk of
but the Flash movie has been in production hell for 8,000 years. Although theoretically it did start.
I'm not saying they're practicing logic over it.
It is
that
true.
Is true.
Like, I think
you are
they
not saying
don't.
that.
That's why you have so many sequels and stuff and franchises, because they're too like afraid to try something new. Like the New Gods could be the new.
Well, it's every time they try something new, like in a way, Green Lantern was something new. Like they had never made a Green Lantern movie, and it like flopped huge, and it was like really bad. But it was like it's because every single time they're going in a direction that's like, oh, that could be fresh and cool. They like fuck it up in some other way. It's just like, Anyway,
well, Green Lantern is an example of. It would have been, I think it could have worked if they'd done like a period movie or something. Like a Green Lantern movie in the 1950s could be
like what the fuck? Because Daniel Cook? It's the Justice League New Era,
New Frontier.
But that could be interesting, but instead they just did like a in today time origin movie.
That still could have been interesting. I didn't actually see the movie, but I saw what Parallax looked like. And why'd you even have to make Parallax the villain? You could have just had a movie about Sinestro being this tyrant that Hal slowly, like, just make Sinestro
Yes.
the villain. Why did you
Make
do
a story
Parallax?
that's interesting and
Yeah.
make it about Green Lantern, and you're
Show-
done.
You know,
You two
show how
clearly
Which is,
don't
we've said
understand.
this 1,000 times
You clearly
to
don't
each other,
understand.
never on an episode.
Sinestro was going to be the bad guy in the sequel that we didn't get to have.
that doesn't make any
Wow.
sense. Parallax should be the bad guy in the sequel, not Sinestro.
You're not thinking with Hollywood
I'm on
logic.
I'm on Patty's side.
God, I hate Hollywood so much. I hate
You
it.
gotta use Hollywood logic. Sinestro, you gotta
It's
say
the worst,
sequel
man.
villain. That's Sinestro.
We're getting into a conversation we should be having on another episode, boys. Let's
Oh
wrap
yeah,
this one
it's
up.
been an hour, right? Let's stop. All right.
Anyway,
All right.
that's been Mobius Couch for this week. We're done. It's over. I'm Joe.
Done. I'm Patrick.
That was Patrick. This guy's name is Al, I think.
I'm Alessandro.
Say goodbye, Al.
Goodbye.